High Court has heard this week how the City of London police lied in statements to justify the use of force, namely using a taser on a social worker who was posing no threat. 36-year-old Edwin Afriyie was pulled over in a traffic stop by the City of London police and at the material time was standing some distance from them with his arms folded when they decided to zap him with 50,000 volts, as shown in body-worn camera footage played in the court.
Let's stop for a second. Is there are you asthmatic? Is there any reason why you can't provide me a sample?
I have breathing issues, yeah.
Yeah, breathing issues. Okay. Blow.
That's it. Sounds like that's happened. Insufficient, Charles.
Sample.
Right. Joe, cuffs on you, mate. You're gonna get nicked now.
Are you joking me?
No.
Just put your arms behind your back for me.
You're under arrest now. Take your hands out your pockets.
Mate, I ain't doing it.
It's off.
You told me that was it.
Calm yourself
you told
down,
me that
mate.
was it.
Calm down.
Listen.
Calm down.
Listen.
The machine has told us you're not doing it. The machine has told you you're not doing it.
Wait, can I speak for a second? You just went to me.
Machine has told you you're not doing it.
You just went to me and said that was it.
Listen.
What's this?
Move back.
What is all this?
SP.
Move back.
SP. He went to me. That was it. I'm blowing. He went. That was it.
Watch. Put your hands out, mate. Put your hands out.
SP.
Put your arms out.
He went to me. Put your arms out again. He went to me and said that was it. Hey sir, get your phone now. Get your phone now. Get your phone now. Get your phone now. Put your hands down.
Mate, move out of the way, mate.
Shut up. Listen.
He went to me and said that was it.
Too many voices.
He told me and said that was it. He did. He went that was. Oh, fuck, man. You mean taser. Do not struggle.
You alright?
50,000 volts going through you.
You okay?
Do not struggle.
You okay?
Do as you're told. The effects don't last. Stay where you are. Check his head.
Stay where you are.
Relax, mate.
Mate, shut up.
He went to me and said, "Hey, put your hands out. Do as you're told." That was it. He did. He went, "Oh, fuck, man." You mean taser. You're pressing on it, man.
Just keep your arms still.
Hey, are you joking me, brother? Relax.
Just keep your arms still, mate.
Over my head, mate.
No, don't put them over your head. Keep them where they are, mate.
My head's hurting, Paul.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, man. For what, bro?
We'll get you back. No.
Please don't let me
Yeah,
go.
there is.
Just relax now, all right?
There is. Cut on his head. CV, can we have an ambulance here? This fella, when taser's gone over his head.
Police at the scene had claimed in written statements that Afriyie was steeling himself to attack officers and had adopted a fighting stance. However, unfortunately for the City of London police, their BS was found out by the footage on their body cams. Afriyie was driving friends back from a party in East London on April 2018 when he was pulled over by police in the city. They told him that they believed he was speeding, but he was never prosecuted for that. He believes he was simply stopped because he was a black man driving a Mercedes. During the interaction, he was breathalyzed, and after the machine repeatedly failed to register his result, he was asked to put his hands behind his back to be handcuffed. But instead, he pulled his arms away, saying he had been told to stop blowing into the device. Afriyie was then tasered in the chest by police whilst he was standing away from them discussing the events with a friend, at which point he fell backwards and hit his head. Evidence produced suggested that he was knocked out briefly, suffered a head injury and was later diagnosed with PTSD. However, the City of London police refuted the fact that he had lost consciousness. Representing Afriyie at the Royal Court of Justice on Wednesday this week, David Hughes said that officers lied repeatedly in their statements to justify the tasering after the fact. No honest person could describe Mr. Afriyie as readying himself to attack anybody. If this tasering was justified, the officers would not need to embellish their accounts. Police are, of course, supposed to only use tasers when there is a serious threat of violence. You know, like when somebody's walking down the road with a lighter, much like what old people might use to light their gas cookers. However, shortly after his arrest, video evidence showed Afriyie being told by one of the bullies in blue, "The reason you got tasered is for not doing as you're told." Judge Jonathan Salmon said Afriyie's reaction to being arrested was not the best, and Mark Leigh Morgan, representing City of London Police, said Afriyie was aggressive where he pulled his hands away from officers and said, "I'm not doing it," as in being arrested. Afriyie was taken to hospital where he refused to take a blood test, citing fear of needles, so instead offered to take a urine test. However, Mark Leigh Morgan for the City of London Police said that this was untrue, pointing to the fact that Afriyie had vaccinations and acupuncture that he had received in the past. Leigh Morgan argued that Afriyie had deliberately failed to blow hard enough in breathalyzer test and was not complying with the police. However, Afriyie denied this and said he had breathing difficulties, which he had visited a doctor about when he was a teenager. But Leigh Morgan countered that argument, saying a consultant said he was healthy and there was no evidence that this issue affected him as an adult. Afriyie was charged at the time with failure to provide a sample for analysis, but when the prosecution was ordered by magistrates to provide a body-worn camera, the case was dropped. In a witness statement to the court, Afriyie said of the aftermath of the incident, "I started to feel as though I should give up on life. I was a shell of a person I was before. Being a proud, strong black man, now I was questioning everything about my appearance and identity. I believe that now I was a target because of the way I looked. I do not believe things would have escalated the way they had if it had not been for the way I looked." In other words, if he was white. Now, clearly, this is a case of butthurt police asserting their dominance over a man who refused to cooperate, which of course should not be happening. Police, as we know, should be made of sterner stuff than that. The tasering, the subsequent injury and the BS statements are all evidence of a misuse of power and a cover-up. But I see a problem here. Not just here, but in wider society. This man was a social worker. He had no doubt dealt with youngsters who had been involved with the police themselves, and I bet my ball bags that he would have told them to be calm and polite when dealing with the police and to do what they say. But yet in this incident, it appears he fails to breathe into the breathalyzer adequately, and I base that assumption on the fact that he himself claimed to have breathing issues, and then pulled away from the police when they went to handcuff him. The police overreacted, absolutely, no doubt about that. But would they have acted that way, or at least as aggressively, if Afriyie complied? Or less aggressively if it was a white man non-complying? My point here is not that I'm telling people to comply with unlawful orders or bend over and lube up for them to shaft you every which way. My point here is that getting more and more common for black or BAME folk to fight back against the police in many situations, claiming that they're being picked on just because they're black, which then escalates the situation to where police might need to restrain the person, and then the person fights back more, meaning the police need to use more force. And then, after the event, claim it's all down to their skin colour rather than the fact they might have been belligerent, uncooperative and or aggressive. I'm not talking about excessive force here, by the way. I'm talking about general use of force to handcuff someone or detain them. In some cases, the excessive use of force comes after the detainee decides to fight back. And this isn't just black people I'm referring to here. We see many white folk doing exactly the same thing. But again, these cases are not highlighted as much as those involving black or BAME folk. Clearly, in this situation, the police lied to cover up their abuse of power and their aggressiveness towards Afriyie. But pulling away when police are trying to cuff you, failing to provide a specimen of breath, are both going to put you in the fire line for police who expect us all to simply do what we're told without question. And I fear that as this craze of fighting back increases between black folk and police under the argument of racism, more and more stories like this will emerge, and genuine discriminatory police stops will simply get lost in amongst the noise of false claims of racism. based on a stopped person's behaviour towards the police. It seems it's almost being used as a get out of trouble card. Practically any BAME or black folk can simply shout racism in the aftermath of an incident, and then it gets them some publicity with a chance of being let off due to these institutional racism claims and the police not wanting to look bad in front of ethnic communities. But it's not going to help anyone, whether you're black or white. As I say, if you're black, then your genuine claims of discrimination will be lost in a wave of complaints, a bit like the boy who cried wolf. And for those police who simply want to take a piece of everyone they meet and assert their authority, they will start to target other people, with many police afraid to interact with black or BAME folk when the very nature of being a police constable is to act without fear or favour. I think these incidents need to be highlighted, but I also think we need to consider the repercussion of people potentially using their race as an argument with almost every interaction that they have with police. With police wanting to have half the police force positions filled with BAME constables, I wonder what excuse people will use then when they're faced with a black man using force on a black man, much like the Chelsea Bridge Road incident. It's funny how not much has been said about the fact it was a black copper tasering a black man. In fact, it seems that that particular highlight is getting glossed over.